Welcome to the J Sizzle podcast, and today I'm going to be doing a little NFL preview. Talking about these are going to be 15-minute segments. Just going to start doing one every single day, and these segments are going to just be like a 15-minute roundup of the news recently and what I expect, to kind of see moving forward. So this is the first episode of the NFL quick podcast, is what I like to call them. They're going to be like quick run-ins. I'm going to do about 15 minutes every day when I do them. And we'll start today. I'm going to randomize and pick a team, pick about 15 minutes, or do about 15 minutes, and start today with the Miami Dolphins. So there's a lot of excitement coming into this season with the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, the addition of Tyreek Hill brings in a lot of excitement to this organization. Also, the fact that, a lot of people think this could be the breakout year for Tua. I know fans have been saying that in Miami for about 3 years now, so we'll see what happens with that. So let's move into Miami, right? Let's look at their schedule. Miami will open up New England at home week 1. I think they'll win that game in week 1. Then in week 2, I think go into Baltimore. I think they'll lose that one, drop to 1-1. Then in week 3, they have the Bills at home. I think they'll lose, drop to 1-2. The Bengals on the road, I think you drop to 1-4. Sorry, 1-3, my bad. Then you have the Jets on the road. I think you'll lose on the road to the Jets. Honestly, I think they split with the Jets. I think you drop to 1-4. The Vikings at home, I think you pick up a win, you go to 2-4. Steelers at home, I think you pick up another win, you go to 3-4. Lions on the road, you pick up another win, you go to 4-4. Then you have the Bears on the road. I think you'll pick up a win in that one and go to 5-4. Then you have the Browns at home. I think you'll move to 6-4. And then the following week, you have the Texans at home, 7-4. 49ers on the road, 7-5. Chargers on the road, 7-6. Then you have to play the Bills for the second time on the road. Second time total, first time on the road, 7-7. Packers at home, 7-8. Patriots on the road, 7-9. And then you'll have the Jets at home, 8-9. So I think the Dolphins will realistically go 8-9 this season, right? So if you look at those games I talked about, right, let me go back and look at those games really quick, right? I'm going to tell you, obviously, nothing is guaranteed, but what I think are guaranteed wins and what I think are guaranteed losses, and then the games that can go 50-50 either way. So I think when you look at it, I think it's guaranteed almost that they'll split with New England. I think it's a back and forth that they'll either win both against the Jets or split. I think, honestly, it's almost a guarantee they lose both against Buffalo. I think Buffalo is just a couple steps ahead. I think it's a guarantee they lose in Baltimore. Guarantee they lose in Cincinnati. I think it's a guarantee that they lose in San Francisco, as well as a guarantee that they lose against the Chargers. I think the Packers at home, more than likely, is probably going to be a loss, as I talked about earlier, but that could potentially be you never know. That could be on the bubble, I guess, if Miami plays really well at home because it is a home game. So the big thing that I want to get into now, obviously, is talking about Tua, right? So last season, Tua finished 27th in total yards thrown at 2,653. He threw for 16 touchdowns, which was tied for 23rd in the league, 10 interceptions, which was tied for 9th most in the league, and then had a quarterback rating of 49.7, which was 18th in the league out of all quarterbacks. So there's this thing going around with Tua, obviously, if you keep up with the NFL news and media, that he struggles throwing the deep ball, which we saw a lot of that, right? And that's kind of insisting, if you look at the stats, the fact that he didn't throw for that many yards, right? He has a good completion percentage, right? We know his completion percentage is very good at 67% last season, where his completion percentage was up from 3% the year before. But at the same time, if you're just throwing dump downs and short passes, you might have to question, you might have to say, okay, that's probably why your completion percentage is so high. So I think a lot of people would go either way with that one, and talking about his completion percentage, whether it's that 67% is actually impressive, or it's more just the fact that you throw so many dump downs and so many short passes that, you have a higher percent chance to complete those passes. If, higher percent chance to complete short passes, because it's tougher to guard a lot of times, those short little screens or those short little slant routes. And people have made that argument. So for me on Tua, I think he's around like a 74 overall player as of right now, in my opinion. I think he's just a little too inconsistent. I think when he's good, he's good. And I think when he's bad, he's really bad. I think there just needs to be more consistency. There needs to be more. When Tua plays really well, for example, like when I just talked about he plays good, he is a really good quarterback. Like he can throw for, he might not throw for a ton of yards, but he'll throw for like 215, 220, and he'll throw like a touchdown or two, and he won't throw a pick, and he'll complete a high percentage, 75% of his passes, right? That's what a good game looks like. And you look at those games and you're like, okay, he's pretty good. He's almost like a game manager type of quarterback. But then you look at games where he's not, when he doesn't play as well, right? Because there's really no in between with him. It's either good or bad. Then you look at games where he doesn't play well, and it's like he'll throw 2 picks. He'll throw for 160 yards on like 26 pass attempts, and it's like, I don't know how you only throw for that many yards on that many attempts. And you'll look at it and be like, well, he can't get the ball on the field. A shoulder injury, obviously in college, is still affecting him now. He can't really turn that well. So there's a lot of things to be talked about with Tua. I personally think this will be an okay year for him. I don't think it'll be great. I think it'll kind of be like last year, just like decent, nothing special. And I think they'll move on from him after this year because you got to understand, right? They bring in Tyreek Hill, right? They had to trade a lot of draft capital and they had to trade a lot for Tyreek Hill. And also they lost draft picks on the whole Stephen Ross thing. So the Dolphins are going to have to be very careful with what they do with these, this year especially, and then also the next upcoming years in terms of if Tua doesn't work out, where they have to move forward, right? Because you just signed Tyreek Hill to a long-term deal. You don't want to make him unhappy. All right, you got a young team, a young core. You just signed a couple running backs we'll talk about in a second. So the big thing is you got to have that quarterback position rounded out, right? And if Tua doesn't work after this year, it's 3 years in already, and I think you just have to move on. I think you have to figure, hey, either use him as a backup or try to trade him and see what we can get for him. Obviously they were pretty attached to Deshaun Watson for a long time, and then we know obviously that fell through. He ended up going to the Browns with all his legal stuff. We don't even know if he's going to play this year. He probably won't, more than likely. So, if you look at it like that, right, obviously the Dolphins could have made maneuvers on some guys, but they didn't. They decided to stick with Tua. They wanted to give him one more chance. So this is his make or break year. And obviously, having Tyreek Hill there, the reason they brought him there is to say, hey, here's another weapon you have. So you can't, we can't really make any more excuses for you if you don't play well because you have all the weapons in your display, right? An offensive line still needs a little more work, but it's not terrible. You have obviously Tyreek Hill. You have Jalen Waddle, who I want to talk about. Last season, Jalen Waddle, 104 catches, just over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was 8th in catches as a rookie, which is just ridiculous. So, obviously, Jalen Waddle is going to be a special player. They drafted him really early last year for a reason, right? I mean, he had a great rookie year. He lived up to his hype. Anything, he probably should have been drafted top 4 if you really look at it again. But Jalen Waddle had an incredible year. Last year was a great pick for the Dolphins, probably one of their best picks in the last couple years. And hopefully he's able to, keep going with that success and get even better, right? Having Tyreek Hill there honestly might give Jalen Waddle actually more opening to do stuff because people are going to double team Tyreek Hill, which will leave Jalen Waddle more opportunity, which is crazy to think because I think before Tyreek got to Miami, I think coming into the year, I think a lot of people would have looked at it and said, oh, Jalen Waddle is a really good player, but he may struggle a little more in the second year like a lot of receivers do because of the fact that now he's going to get doubled. Well, now that Tyreek Hill's there, he's not going to get doubled. He's actually probably going to get just the same amount of attention as he got last year as a rookie where people almost don't know him. And now it's not that they won't know him. It's just that you're going to be doubling Tyreek. So it's kind of like, you're going to leave a lot of opportunity for Jalen Waddle. So should be another big year for Jalen Waddle. I'm expecting another 100-catch season. I'm expecting a little uptick in yards, uptick in touchdowns. I want to say 8 touchdowns, 1,260 yards around there, around that area. So, no, I expect another big year for Jalen Waddle. I think, just proving himself once again and showing that he'll be one of the best receivers in this league very soon. So before we get to the tight end spot and the running backs, Devontae Parker left Miami and went to New England. So that was, that was an interesting move because if you look at Devontae Parker, right, he was so on and off of Miami, right? He had like 1 or 2 really good years, and then the rest of the years were horrible. But there were a lot of, not horrible, I don't want to say, just injury riddled, right? There were such high expectations for him when he got drafted out of Louisville, and people thought he was going to be like the next big thing, right? And even when he was healthy, like in his first couple years, he showed flashes that were just like ridiculous, and everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing. Even myself, I did too. And then he came in, I want to say 2 years ago, and had over 1,000 yards, had a huge season, and everybody's like, that's the Devontae Parker we've been looking for so long. And then the last year or two, it's kind of just been like on and off injured. When he's healthy, he's been okay, but not great. He's been more of a number 3 receiver than what we thought he was going to be when he was drafted as a number 1 and what he was that 1 year when he had 1,000 yards as a number 1. So it's been too much on and off, and, they moved on from him, moved him to New England. So it'll be interesting to see how he does over there in New England. Moving to the tight end spot, you have Mike Gesicki, right? And, I'm a big fan of Mike Gesicki. I think he's one of the most underrated tight ends in the league. I think, when you look at his stats from last year, right, 73 catches, which I think is great. 780 yards is great as a tight end, 10.7 on average. Could improve that average, yards per catch a little more. That's just going to be depending on how they disguise him into the system. With the new head coach this season, obviously, he should be disguised much differently in that system and hopefully get up to that 13, 14 yards per catch area. But the one thing I really want to see with him is I want to see him become a red zone threat, right? Only 2 touchdowns last year. You want to see that get up to 5 or 6 based on the amount of catches he has and also the amount of yards he has normally on a season. You want to see those touchdowns get more into that 5 to 6 range, which I think could obviously help out Tua a lot if he could have a big-time reliable target in the red zone. Gesicki's been great, like I said, in his short career, and he's been very underrated, but he hasn't been great in the red zone. We need to see more touchdowns from him in order to help Tua elevate his game as well. So that's something that we're looking out for as well next year with the Dolphins. I think when you look at the running back spot, Myles Gaskin, last year was okay, not great. Nobody was really that impressed, really. So now you bring in Sony Michel, right? Obviously, we know they brought him in over there from New England. Very underrated pickup. I think he'll be their number one, but it's going to be tough to say because you also have Chase Edmonds, right? So those are the two guys. Then you have Raheem Mostert, which I don't really know, what kind of, obviously when he's playing, he's very good, but to me, he's going to be more like I don't know. I don't think he's going to get a lot of reps. Big injury history, super fast, but not super reliable and consistent as a running back. So I think you'll be looking at more reps from Chase Edmonds and Sony Michel. Sony Michel probably being your number one, Chase Edmonds being your, third down back where, you can dump it off, dump it off in the flat to him and he can make catches and make plays, catching the ball. So that's something I'm looking at for for that running back core. I think it's a good running back core. It's much better than what they had last year, so it should really take pressure off Tua. Have another guy for Tua to dump it down to, right? He didn't really have that last year with Gaskin. Now we'll have that with Chase Edmonds. So, and then we'll have a much better running back with Sony Michel compared to Myles Gaskin, who he had last year. So that should be something that's, should really stand out there on the offense. Now, getting towards the defensive side of the ball, right? And this is where the Dolphins are really strong at, right? One of the best secondaries in all football. Of course, you bring back Xavier Howard, who had some contract, not some contract issues, just some issues, this past summer and even last summer. But now it seems like he's staying put in Miami and he's happy, right? Xavier Howard, and then at the other corner spot, you got Byron Jones, right? Byron Jones is probably a little overpaid in my opinion. He's a good player, just needs a little more consistency. Not like when he got to Miami, I think he's been good in Miami, but not like he was in Dallas. Personally, that's just my opinion. And I think he's a little overpaid, but he's still a very solid corner, probably a top 15 corner in this league with Xavier being a top 5 corner. You have a good combination there. And then at the safety spot, obviously, you have Brandon Jones, right? Brandon Jones is a solid player, but I personally think when I look at, and then you have Javon Holland, who we'll talk about in a second, I personally think Eric Rowe is one of the most underrated safeties in the league. I think Eric Rowe is great. I think he's a good tackler. He forced 3 fumbles last year, which was really impressive too, and I think he's very good in coverage. I think, a little improvement in man coverage, but in zone coverage, I think he's solid. He makes a lot of plays. He's very underrated. So I think he's a great player for them. Now you talk about, Javon Holland, right? Very young guy out of Oregon, right? He was last year they picked him in the second round. Had a very solid rookie year, in my opinion. 2 picks, 48 solo tackles. Had a good PFF grade from last season as a rookie last season. So coming into his second year, it should be interesting to see how he fits in and how he plays during his second year because he had a very good first year last year. So, and then of course, Jerome Baker at the linebacker spot, right? Always been someone, in my opinion, as well that's very underrated. Good tackler, pretty solid at guarding tight end. So big fan of Jerome Baker too. He should have another good year. Jalen Phillips. Interesting when you talk about Jalen Phillips, right? Because if you look at Jalen Phillips, he was the 18th pick last year in the draft, and a lot of people thought, well, he wasn't a good pick. And it actually turned out that Jalen Phillips ended up being a very good pick for Miami. And hopefully, with 8.5 sacks last year as a rookie, which is very solid, hopefully he can get to that 10-plus range this year sack-wise. And hopefully he can be their main guy getting to the quarterback. So Jalen Phillips was a great pick last year. And to touch on that really quick, the Dolphins, when you look at it, had a great draft last year. Jalen Phillips and, Jalen Waddle in the first round. That was an incredible first-round draft for the Miami Dolphins. So, and then Javon Holland as well. So just looking, he was second round, but just looking at what Miami was able to do in the draft last year, part of the reason why they were pretty solid last year towards the second half of the year, just some of those rookies kind of feeling the groove a little more and getting into it. Hopefully now they can take that into the second half, that, progress that they had in the second half of the year. Hopefully they can take that now into their second year. So should be really interesting really interesting to see what Miami does this season. I think defensively, I think they'll be a top 12 team. I think offensively, they'll be more towards the 18 to 23 range. I think their schedule's tough. And I only say 8 and 9 because not that I don't think they're a good team. I just think they have a very tough schedule. I mean, you got to play the Chargers, right? You got to play the 49ers, right? The Bills are going to be tough. You're going to play them twice. The Patriots are going to be really tough. You're going to play them twice, right? And then the Jets, obviously they've, been horrible in recent memory, but they're going to be pretty solid this year, right? I mean, the Jets had the best draft out of any team this past year. And, they got some star-studded, to be soon receivers like Elijah Moore, right? And a quarterback that's, I think, is going to have a great year. So the Jets aren't going to be easy. The Dolphins will definitely be better than the Jets, but the Jets aren't going to be a 3-win team like they normally are. They're probably going to be a 5-6-win team. So, you got a tougher division, and of course, like I said, the schedule's tough. Cincinnati 2 on the road, the defending AFC champions. So it will be very interesting to see how the Miami Dolphins play this season, right? And I'm going to say the same thing most people say. I love the new head coach. I love the new hire. I think he's great. I think he's going to really, do what he did in San Francisco with Debo. I think he's going to put Tyreek in similar situations, and he may actually make Tyreek may be better than he was in Kansas City. We'll see. Or Tyreek may have just been assistant player in Kansas City that, needed Patrick Mahomes. So we'll really see what Tyreek is all about. And he's looked incredible in training camp, especially against the Buccaneers in their joint practice the other day. But we'll see what Tyreek's able to do. Should be interesting, right? And the big thing, like I said, is going to be Tua. The big thing is going to be Tua. He has all the weapons for him now. So now it's really time for him to prove himself. And like we said earlier, if he doesn't prove himself, I think that's it for Tua and they'll move on. So that's going to wrap it up for the Dolphins podcast. Make sure you guys comment below. Let me know what you guys think the Dolphins record will be. I went over their schedule earlier in this podcast in the first couple minutes. Look at their schedule yourself and tell me what you think record-wise. Put it in the comments and let me know. And I'll be interested to see what you guys think because this is a very interesting team this year. So a lot of media talk about them, a lot of talk in general. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thanks again.